Hi, welcome back to part 5 of this time travel back to 1828-9. William Corder has been apprehended. He's now in Colchester to be sent back to Polstead. He's found out that he's actually got married, so he's got a legal wife now. And also, what's strange is Maria Marten, I found, actually could write very well. That her father was part of the worry was that he never received a letter from his daughter, which surprised me because in my family, going back that date, they all just had to sign their name with a cross when they had legal documents. So it's quite interesting that she was able to write quite well. So she must have gone to a local school and be quite well educated. Yet she had 3 illegitimate children, so it's very strange. The picture before you now is the picture of Manningtree High Street, and we'll see how this comes into play in a minute. Over here is the White Hart Public House. Opposite it was a bank. Now Barclays is here now as a bank, but that doesn't look very old. Maybe the top looks a bit older, but there's also the post office next door to that, which looks a bit older as well. So that might have been the bank, because when you come into what I'm going to speak about soon, they're talking about a bank opposite the White Hart. So it could either be this one, the Barclays, that's just had a facelift, and maybe that is an old building, or it might be this one, the old post office. But it's certainly that was the White Hart. It's no longer a pub. So let's get into this next episode. So William Corder is at the George in Colchester. He's just had a meeting with Mr. Moore, his wife's brother. And Mr. Moore has now gone. There appeared to be a decided difference in the conduct of the prisoner when compared with that of the preceding day. He sometimes paced the room with a silk handkerchief thrown loose over his neck, with his eyes cast upon the ground, and scarcely speaking to anyone for an hour together. At other times, he would sit down and look at some religious books and tracts which had been given him, but from the hurried manner in which he turned over the leaves, it was quite manifest that his mind was in too perpetuated a state to pursue the contents with any degree of profit or attention. During the day, he was frequently speaking of his wife, and was more than once exclaimed, "Oh, that I could be as free from sin as my beloved wife is." In the course of the day, Dr. Nunn, a gentleman well known in the medical world, paid a visit to the prisoner, and had this gentleman been a clergyman, he could not have exhorted and advised the unhappy man with more pathos and feeling. Indeed, we were told by the person from Polstead, who was with him nearly the whole day, that Corder appeared more deeply affected by what this gentleman said than by the exhortations which had been previously given him. About 9 o'clock in the evening of this day, Thursday, the life of the prisoner was again put into jeopardy by another and distinct implication of guilt, a charge of forgery was added to the dreadful one upon which he was already detained in custody. Hearing that the prisoner was at Colchester, Mr. Taylor, the chief clerk of the banking house of Messrs. Alexander and Co. at Manningtree, accompanied by Mr. Dale, the proprietor of the White Hart Inn, opposite the bank, arrived in a chaise at the Georgian. Upon their being introduced to the room where Corder was sitting, they both immediately recognised him as being the person who had obtained £93 from that above bank upon a forged cheque. Mr. Taylor approached the prisoner with a cheque in his hand and said to him, "Pay me the £93 you received upon this cheque." The prisoner was mute from astonishment and hung down his head. Mr. Taylor, again addressing him sternly, said, Why don't you look at me in the face like a man?" To this challenge the prisoner made no reply, but continued to hang down his head as before. But at length he threw himself into a chair and hid his face in his hands. During this interview, the prisoner neither admitted nor denied the forgery imputed to him, and Mr. Taylor and Mr. Dale left the room. The following are the circumstances on which the cheque was presented and cashed, for the knowledge of which we are indebted to Mr. T. Now, there's no name there, but it could well be Mr. Taylor. On Monday, the 14th of April, a person known by the informant and Mr. Dale as to be the prisoner arrived at the White Hart Inn at Manningtree, which is kept by the latter gentleman, and whose house is opposite the bank, in which informant is principal clerk. And he said that he had a cheque which he wished to get cashed. Mr. Dale told him he was too early, as the bank was not open, but if his business required haste, he would speak to the informant to expedite it. The prisoner said that he was in no hurry, and there the matter for the time rested. A short time after, Mr. Dale met with informant and told him of the circumstance, and soon that the bank was open, the prisoner went over and presented a cheque purporting to be drawn upon the Hadley branch of the same firm by R. Atkins in favour of Mr. Cook, and asked informant to give him cash for it. The cheque was for £93. The informant told the prisoner that he was not acquainted with Mr. Atkins or Mr. Cook, and that it was not a usual thing for him to change cheques for unknown persons. To this the prisoner replied that he was well known in the neighbourhood, that his name was Cook, and that he was a farmer at Wenham Hall. So he's purporting to be this Mr. Cook, and that he had received the cheque on the previous Saturday from Mr. Atkins, who was a butcher residing at Stratford, in payment for 5 head of cattle. Informant replied that he had never seen the name of Atkins to a Hadley cheque before. The prisoner repeated that he was well known in the neighbourhood, and that Mr. Dale, who lived at White Hart Inn opposite, knew him very well. Informant said that if Mr. Dale would come over and state that he knew him, perhaps he might be satisfied. Mr. Dale did come over shortly afterwards and said that he knew the prisoner by having him frequently at the house. Informant then gave cash for the cheque, viz. £85 in £5 local banknotes and 8 £1 notes. The prisoner immediately left the place and went to Ipswich, where he got sovereigns in exchange for the notes. On the same evening, informant, having sent the cheque to Hadley, discovered that it was a forgery and that Mr. Atkinson, not Atkins, who resides at Stratford, denied all knowledge of it. The cheque was filled up on a printed form of Hadley Bank, at which place Mrs. Corder, the prisoner's mother, kept her cash. Something which had been inserted in the newspaper descriptive of the prisoner was the cause why the informant and Mr. Dale were induced to go to Colchester to see the prisoner, who, they were quite sure, was the person who presented and obtained cash for the cheque. Lee, the officer, was present when a statement similar to this was made by Mr. T, and he recollected that, after he had searched the house at Brentford, the prisoner asked him whether he had found 80 sovereigns in the drawer of the writing desk. He declared that he had made no such discovery, upon which the prisoner said, "Then I dare say my wife has taken them out." After this, Mrs. Corder came to the Red Lion at Brentford and acknowledged that she had taken out 20 sovereigns, which she placed in the prisoner's hands. Removal from Colchester to Polstead. So that is the White Hart there. So we're now going to go to Polstead. And this is the Polstead Mill Pond. Well, it's Polstead Pond at the bottom of the road. From here, you go up the hill to the Cock Inn at Polstead there. Okay? So this is the pond, which will be referred to later in the chat. Removal from Colchester to Polstead. At an hour approaching to midnight, the prisoner was removed from Colchester, well secured and in the custody of Lee and heirs. Having taken their place in the post-chaise, they set off with all speed towards the Cock Inn at Polstead. The removal at this late hour was at the suggestion of Sir William Rowley, who considered that it was obviate those popular excitements which the circumstances of the case were calculated to produce. There was also this additional and paramount consideration suggested from the motives of a humanity which swayed the mind of the worthy baronet. The prisoner would have to pass the door of his aged and heartbroken mother on his way to the Cock. She is much respected in the neighbourhood, and he wished to give her as little pain as possible. The chaise reached Polstead about 2 o'clock in the morning. During the greater part of this journey, the prisoner slept soundly, but on descending Stoke Hill, near his native village, he aroused himself, and on passing his mother's residence, he was dreadfully agitated. After he recovered himself, he spoke with much apparent feeling of the manner in which his family had been cut off by death within the last 15 months. He pointed out the pond in which his brother Thomas had been drowned. So this must have been the pond where his brother had drowned. And 2 other brothers had since, he said, died of consumption, and he was the only remaining male branch of the family. So they've had some very bad luck. There being a very steep hill leading from the pond before alluding to the Cock Inn. So that's the hill they've got to now traverse. The prisoner and the officers alighted from the chaise and walked up it, but on their arrival, Mr. Gordon had retired to rest, naturally supposing that the party would not arrive until the next day. A fire was immediately lighted, by which the prisoner sat for some time. So let's go up the hill with them up to the Cock. So we just move up here, going up the hill. And you've got these old houses on both sides, still there. These old houses. So he walks up here. He walk up here. And there is the Cock Inn. A fire was immediately lighted, by which the prisoner sat for some time, and after partaking of some slight refreshment, he retired to bed. The officer slept in the same room with him, but apparently extremely restless, and frequently referred to the solemn inquiry which was to take place in a few hours. But he neither uttered an expression with a view to implicate or exculpate himself. Indeed, the extraordinary manner in which the prisoner appeared to bridle his tongue during the whole investigation was very remarkable. From the window of his chamber, he beheld a number of fields which belonged to his mother, and to which he made frequent allusions. Maria Marten's cottage could also be seen, and the pasture which she crossed on the fatal day when she left her father's house, her child, and her kindred to become the victims of a cold-blooded and deliberate assassination. So over here, you would have seen some of the fields and the house of Maria Marten from his window. adjourned coroner's inquest. On the following Friday morning, the inquest was resumed and the same jury empanelled as before. During the interval between this period and the finding of the body, Polstead had been one continued scene of bustle and inquiry. But on this occasion, it was literally crowded with strangers from all parts of the adjacent country. For the news of this appalling discovery had ere this reached the remotest parts of the kingdom. I'll end there as we've got up to 15 minutes and continue our journey in time. Thank you. Please subscribe, hit the like button and make any comments on this video. I'm sorry there's still a bit of technical issues, but this is a start of my YouTube career, as it were. And I'm not really into IT. So thank you and hope to see you next time. Bye.